So today's Tech Talk is presented by Microsoft Solutions Architect Matt Smith. Here's a quick intro on Softworks' popular Microsoft Security Tech Talks. If this is the first time that you're joining one of them, the Microsoft Security Tech Talks are designed to keep your organization on top of the latest Microsoft security stack. As we know, it's always evolving. There is always a lot of new features coming through, and these webinars are free technical workshops. So apologies in advance if there's some language that is a bit out of the ordinary and Matt starts speaking in ones and zeros. These workshops are semi-structured and include some slides, but it's really all about the live demo environment and really digging into the actual technology and getting a feel for that in some use cases as well, some live use cases. And we've covered some hot topics already, including things like Microsoft Sentinel, Microsoft 365 Defender, Cloud App Security, Zero Trust, Privileged Access Management, and many more. And you can find more of those on demand on our website, and we can post the link in the chat as well. So these Tech Talks happen every third Tuesday of the month, which we call Tech Talk Tuesday. And thanks again for joining us. Just a quick update. Softworks is a Microsoft Gold partner, and we have been for 20 years. For those of you that don't know us, we're all about Microsoft end-to-end security and compliance, and we've partnered with a lot of the industry leaders, including the Cloud Industry Forum, and we hold multiple accreditations, including ISO 27001 and Cyber Essentials Plus. So although we talk about Microsoft first, we are not Microsoft only by any means, and hence the discussion around Zscaler and what the role of that is with regards to Microsoft 365. Just a quick intro for those of you that don't know Matt. I know a lot of people will know him. Matt is our senior Microsoft Solutions Architect here at Softworks. When he's not designing advanced Microsoft security infrastructure, for example, the SOC services that we've recently launched here at Softworks, Matt actually loves to go touring on classic BMWs. I think the limit is 500 quid he's allowed to spend on a vehicle, which he's then tripping for hundreds, if not thousands of miles across Europe, and indeed other continents as well, which have taken him as far as the Alps, the Lake District, the Peak District, Austria, Switzerland, Greece, Italy, Scotland's North Coast 500, which is really quite adventurous, and I think even as far as Morocco and North Africa. So to get on to today's topic, I won't kind of steal Matt's thunder. I couldn't even if I tried, but just to give you a bit of a taste for Zscaler, if you don't know, or some of you might be quite familiar with it already, Zscaler for Microsoft 365 complies with Microsoft's connectivity recommendations, equipping businesses with the power to do three main things. One is identify and differentiate Microsoft 365 traffic. Two is egress network connections locally and enable direct connections through the Zero Trust exchange. And number three is avoid network hairpins by enabling local internet breakouts to Microsoft 365 for remote users and branches without VPNs, network hairpins, and costly MPLS connections. But yeah, like I say, Matt will really be able to give you a better taste for how Microsoft 365 and Zscaler really fit together. So without further ado, I will hand over to Matt for the rest of the presentation. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Patrick. So yeah, that's a reasonable kind of, in a nutshell, how or where kind of some of the benefits come from with Zscaler. So what I wanted to do today was to give you a little bit of a kind of glimpse into the kind of technical points where Microsoft and Zscaler kind of come together. And for those of you that have never seen Zscaler or don't have any kind of experience of what it is, I'll just give you a little bit of an insight into kind of what its purpose is and why it exists and why we use it alongside the whole Microsoft 365 portfolio. And the reason I thought I'd bring this kind of talk to this month is I've spent a couple of sessions recently with customers who are sort of asking the question of, well, why do I want both, and what's the point? And shouldn't Microsoft do all of this for me. And so that was where the idea of this particular talk was born out of. So we'll go through a little bit of a look at what Zscaler is, and then we'll dive into some of the consoles, and we'll look at kind of how it joins up and where you would want to join it up, and just give a few examples. This isn't by any means going to be completely comprehensive. We could spend a whole day just looking at the features and functions of Zscaler in its own right, let alone all of the various ways that we can then tie that into our kind of complete Microsoft solution. But if anybody gets anything from this where they want to explore a bit further into what's possible or what you might want to do with it, then please do reach out. All the contact details will be there at the end of the presentation, or if you're already working with us, then reach out to your account manager. They'll be able to schedule a session where we can go through in detail and look at what you want to achieve with it. So for those of you that have never seen Zscaler, have no idea kind of what it is or what the point is, then this is just a one slide that I've actually borrowed from the Zscaler team, from the sales team. So its purpose is to provide you with that kind of secure access edge, as it tends to be called, and it provides you with an ability to kind of ingress and egress from your client PCs to any network and any service in any location from any device. So for those of you that go back kind of as far as I do, in one aspect, it's kind of as simple as an outbound proxy, where you're providing all of your content filter controls for what your users are doing. From another aspect, it's a little bit like your VPN to the data center for being able to manage users' remote access into VMs and kind of server-side apps. But it's kind of a whole lot more than that. And what I want to try and get across today is just to show you how some of its functions can be leveraged and used with the Microsoft portfolio to really kind of control all aspects of all connectivity that go on with your users on their devices, kind of no matter where they are. So I'll go a little bit further into the platform and the product itself. So it's at a massive global scale, Zscaler, and what you're doing is you're connecting your user devices with typically an agent, but it may also be fixed site locations that are connected through traffic forwarding with routers or firewalls to the Zscaler service. So what you're doing is you're capturing all of the traffic as it leaves your users' endpoint devices. So they might be Windows PCs, Macs, even kind of Linux hosts, for those of you that are brave enough to have Linux on a client machine, I suppose. But also you need to cover the servers and your mobile devices as well. So it has its iOS agents and its Android agents as well. So it really does encompass every possible device type that the users are on. And then it's intercepting all of the network traffic as it leaves that device, and it's hiving it off to what we call these enforcement nodes. So this is where we enter the Zscaler environment, and at those enforcement nodes we can then manipulate and control, log and monitor what the users gain access to, and also because we're watching the kind of reply that comes back to the users' machines. When they go to access a site or a service, we get a point in which we can intercept that if we believe that to be malicious. So where we're trying to continue to build this sort of zero trust model at all times, one of the areas that often trips us up is if a user is somehow kind of directed to go and log in to what they think is the Microsoft single sign-on page, that comes from your Azure Active Directory. They think they're going for their mailbox or OneNote or SharePoint or something online, or any of your federated services for that matter, and somebody has mocked up what looks like the Microsoft sign-in page in order to try and capture credentials. This type of platform enables you to see that and take action against it because we're able to monitor all of the requests that the users make and all of the return traffic, regardless of how they were directed to it, because we're intercepting their network traffic effectively at the IP layer within the device. So across all network connection types, no matter how they're getting to us. And it gives us a great level of kind of protection for monitoring and kind of tunneling effectively all of their internet traffic out when they're on connections like the kind of free Wi-Fi in Costa and Starbucks and places like that, where who knows what else is on that Wi-Fi network or how secure that Wi-Fi network is that they're attached to. So that's kind of the starting point, the sort of basic building blocks of the Zscaler service, and that's what we call the internet access service part. So it's often referred to as ZIA or Zscaler Internet Access. And then alongside that, in the same agent, the same kind of deployed package that goes onto the devices, we also have an ability to connect them to what we call the private access service. And the idea behind that is that we have an appliance, it's usually a virtual machine, sat on a network somewhere where we host our own systems. So there might be servers, or in Azure it might be on a virtual network, and on that VNet you may have other kind of platform as a service systems that they're interacting with. So it doesn't have to be VMs, and doesn't have to be a physical network in your building. It can be kind of anywhere that you can connect a user to a network of some sort to access some resources that are on that network. And you have as many of those connection points as you need as part of your service. We call them the private access connectors. And in that model, the idea there is that all the components in the system call out to the Zscaler platform. So at no point in the private access connection model do we ever have any inbound ports open. So the PCs definitely aren't, and you wouldn't expect them to, in the same sort of way a VPN, software VPN connection would only be outbound. But we also have the same model on the private access connector end. The connector is opening an HTTPS, so a TLS tunnel, if you like, from the connector on that resource network where you're running your systems out to the Zscaler platform, and then we're joining those services up. So what the user needs to access to the service that is published by the connector through the Zscaler environment. And there's one really key important piece there, because that sounds a lot like kind of VPN, a sort of soft-based VPN. But in this model, to go with our Zero Trust approach, what we're doing there is only ever publishing exactly the right services, so the correct IPs or a list of IPs that a specific group of users needs, and to go with those IPs a specific set of ports. So unlike a VPN, where we then typically expose the network segment that they're being connected to, in this model we only ever expose access to the particular port, to the particular server on that particular location for the specified user. And it's all about that zero trust. They don't need anything else, so we only give them access to that. And again, across all devices, and it works through a very simple agent. I can show you the agent here. This would be the Windows PC agent that would be deployed. And in a typical model, we deploy that using Intune or through the MDM service. That way we can deploy it to all the various mobile platforms and Windows and Mac. As I say, they also do have agents for Linux. And then there's the connectors for kind of local networks for the internet access filtering, where we forward the traffic from the firewalls. So it's kind of very non-interactive for the users. It's deployed advising the client what the domain logon type would be, and then we use a single sign-on in order to initiate it. So the user experience is clean, tidy, and very simple. But that's how we get traffic to the system, and the purpose of the service, as I say, is to monitor and control all the traffic going in and out of their users' PCs. So where does this kind of fit in the Microsoft and Zscaler story? Well, typically for us, and an area where we use this a lot, is around customers who've gone through the whole journey with the Microsoft portfolio. So they're on the Microsoft 365 stack of technologies, and they're exploring things like the Cloud App Security Service, where they can insert kind of DLP controls or kind of ban the use of certain services. Maybe they're linking that up to the Defender for Endpoint system so that they can block a particular online application or online system. And they've reached the point in that service where actually they want kind of more granular control, and that's not being provided by the MCAS service, or they want much greater visibility of what's going on, and they want the ability to see that in the Cloud App Security portal, in this sort of shadow IT monitoring capability. But they don't have the Defender for Endpoint service deployed, as an example. So they're not getting that kind of information feedback through there. So what I'm going to do now is just take you through some of the scenarios, only a few of them, because obviously I can't cover the whole thing in kind of half an hour, but I'll take you through some of the scenarios that we commonly work with that are proving very popular with clients who've both already acquired Zscaler and are using it for just web content filtering, and likewise customers who have gone through the kind of Microsoft 365 approach and are looking to get a little bit more out of it. So hopefully, if we drop into a live demo now, if everything's going to play nicely for us, I can give you a bit of an insight into how some of these things work, and potentially just a bit of an insight into kind of how simple this can be from a deployment point of view. So I'm going to start in Azure Active Directory, just because I want to highlight kind of one of the first bits of this, which is all around the kind of identity management. And just really the purpose of showing you this is how straightforward this has been made to integrate the two together. So Zscaler and Microsoft have done a lot of work in the background here to provide this, but when we go to configure a Zscaler customer with Microsoft, it really is as simple when we need to get it started of going to the predefined gallery of connections. You'll be given your enforcement environment that you're connecting to, like where your instance of Zscaler exists, and you pick the one that you've got access to or the service that you're implementing, and then it's a completely wizard-driven process through the Azure portal here, including all of the user provisioning. So it's not just authentication. I know a lot of people kind of experienced this with onboarding federated services before. While authentication is great, the provisioning side of things can sometimes be difficult, but that's all included here in the configuration process through some very straightforward guides and a wizard-driven service to connect them up. There's a number of different services that could be subscribed to in Zscaler. I'm going to focus mostly today around the internet access piece for the purpose of this presentation, but it's the same model for if you're connecting up the private access service. There's also a kind of B2B portal service that's sort of part of private access. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but just suffice to say on those, it's exactly the same sign-up model, and the reason they have the multiple different connections for those is you can sign up and subscribe to the services separately. So once you've established your identity connection to Zscaler, you'll be in the portal or the Zscaler portal where you'll see all of the users and their various departments and the security groups that you've provisioned through that process into the access portal here. So now we have some referenceable users where we can target controls and policies and actions to, and those users can interact, or sorry, can sign in now through this client agent, or if they're being pushed to it through a firewall with forwarding services, then they'll be able to sign in when prompted in the browser or in that application. So we know who they are and where they're going and what they're accessing. And that's really key to knowing or being able to implement controls, especially when we look at things like DLP, or if we're interested in who's doing what in the kind of shadow IT reporting world, we need to know who they are. So it's all about getting them signed up so that we can see who's doing what and be able to enforce the correct controls against them. So what we have from there is we have the ability to connect up our various SaaS application tenants, and also we have an integration that then starts to feed back what's been observed by those agents on the PCs into the Cloud App Security portal. So we had a different topic on the Tech Talk side of things, looking at Cloud App Security, and in there we talked a lot about using the Defender endpoint agent in order to populate what the users are doing and be able to see them. So in scenarios where you've got Zscaler but are not subscribed to the Microsoft Defender service for like EDR or other protection technologies that you get from that, you would still want to be able to understand what services they're using, because that helps you inform you as to whether or not you should be federating with those services, and then restricting your users so they have to go through the federated connection, so you know through Cloud App Security what they're doing and where your data is going. But we'll come back to that with the DLP piece very shortly. So what's happening here in this model is the Zscaler service, by monitoring the user's connections, by watching and seeing what they're doing, what they're uploading, it's able to feed back in through its log service into Cloud App Security, so that we get a much greater understanding of all the services that they're accessing, even if we don't have the Defender agents deployed on the PCs to do that within the closed kind of Microsoft environment. It also means, because for those of you who've tried to deploy the Microsoft agents for Defender onto iOS and Android devices, you get a much more seamless experience when you want to collect log information about what's going on mobile devices back into the Defender Cloud App Security portals. So we've got that kind of logging piece that joins up there, feeds us much more information. We've also got a piece where we report back in the other direction. So where we would typically in Cloud App Security either sanction or block the use of certain applications, what we won't or don't want to do is then through the Zscaler portal have to in parallel constantly maintain a list of allowed and blocked applications and kind of content types or categories, if you like, of services. So the way we put those together is through the Cloud App Security portal here, through your existing processes with your Microsoft policies, where you get an alert to say that you know, somebody's uploading a load of data to an unsanctioned app, go and check it. Your IT teams can continue with their process of just flagging it as sanctioned once it's been approved, or if it's been identified immediately as a risk and needs to be blocked, they can flag it as unsanctioned. And the Cloud App service will then populate through its URL categories capability a category specific to Cloud App Security, so one that you can identify, and then you can have a policy in the Zscaler service so that you will specifically block that category that you've created, so that the Cloud App Security category coming from Microsoft can go straight into a set of URL filtering rules, and Zscaler will automatically then block that piece. Now, while we're looking at kind of what Zscaler does with blocks and allows, category-based stuff is pretty much as far as Cloud App Security goes. All it's really doing in its native form is identifying a service a sort of predefined service based on the URLs that have been accessed, because there's a catalog in the background that's identifying those URLs. And the allow or block, or the sanctioned or unsanctioned function in Cloud App Security by default just feeds back into the Defender for Endpoint service. So if you don't have that, then flagging them as sanctioned or unsanctioned is just telling your IT team whether or not what they're doing is okay, but it's not actually enforcing any control. So by having that capability, you can block those. But you sometimes want to be more granular than that. So we maybe don't mind them using Facebook during the day, or we don't mind them receiving files through Dropbox from customers or suppliers or whoever it is they work with, but we don't want them uploading content to those services, because we don't want, that's all about that exfiltration of data. We just want to know that that's controlled. Well, unless they've signed in to that service and we've captured them at the point of sign in Cloud App Security, we don't have a way to then impose controls, because we're not seeing the connection, we're not proxying it, we don't see what's going on. In Zscaler's environment, through either the Cloud App Controls or the URL filtering policies, but Cloud App Controls is really the powerful bit here, we can enforce very granular requirements over the users. So let's take that file sharing approach. So in this rule set that we've got here, we're allowing our users onto OneDrive, and we're allowing them to view and upload, whereas for all these other services in here, so Dropbox, Box, iDrive, if I go into there and just edit that, you'll see kind of how comprehensive some of this is. For all of these listed applications that Zscaler maintain for you as part of the service, you can specify that these particular services for these particular users, or for a particular department, or when they're in a certain network location that you're running, if you're doing it by buildings rather than agents, you can then decide whether or not they're allowed to download or view effectively the content on there, or upload. So you've got a way there of putting in restrictions specific to the type of service they're going for. So files that still allow them to work with it, but don't allow them to upload in that sort of scenario. You're also gaining similar sorts of controls when it comes to the likes of webmail. So we can make certain webmail services kind of more of a read-only experience for the users by blocking their ability to send. So in this particular scenario, things like Gmail and various others on there are prevented from sending, or kind of, again, it's all about stopping them from exfiltrating that data via that service, but they can still go in and read their email. So they might be allowed to read their personal email on there. There might also be scenarios where you don't mind them sending messages. Sometimes this applies with like Twitter and Facebook and things like that, or even email, where you're happy for them to be able to send, but you maybe don't want them to be able to send attachments on there. So you have to fit this into your acceptable use policies and your kind of compliance policies for the organization. But something really important to get across there, where Microsoft and Zscaler go hand in hand here, is we can, through the Microsoft 365 platform, drop the agents out onto the PCs, seamlessly sign the users in the background, and then centrally here give very granular controls to extend those capabilities that we've got in MCAS to cover any service, any online system that the users might be accessing. So just a small insight there into the kind of cloud app controls piece. You get the same sort of idea with streaming media, can't upload video, social networking, can view but can't post messages onto them. There's a whole world of controls there. And for those of you that manage development teams, we've got a whole catalogue of the various online development systems and services, to stop them from exfiltrating code and data and kind of builds and things of applications out to those services. So that's where we're starting to not just get the monitoring logs back into view, but really enhance and extend that cloud app security capability to to every internet interaction, every connection that the users make. Now we might want to get more granular than that again, and this is again, I think, and something we use a lot of with our clients, a really powerful feature through Zscaler. So let's say through your information protection classifications, you've got your data classifications out there, and you're using the likes of Word and Outlook, and when they save things to SharePoint, you're using those points to monitor the type of content the users have got, and if it's like a highly confidential item, you're applying a label, or you're encouraging the users to apply a label. So you're using that whole Microsoft information protection labeling capability across the business. So you've now got a way to identify content that you're storing in OneDrive, SharePoint, file servers, doesn't really matter where it is, but you've got that content that's been labeled. So we've now got something that we can watch for on that system. So I'll just give you a little bit of an insight into how we use that and kind of what we do with it, and what Zscaler on its internet access controls, what enhancement it lets us have over MCAS. So if I go back to that idea of what are we doing typically within an MCAS policy on here, around information protection, we're typically applying a label, applying a classification because we've seen something happen. So a user is outside of the corporate network IP ranges and they've accessed some content, so we're going to slap the label on it, and that might encrypt the file or place that control on it. We might also be watching for they've signed into a service like OneDrive or Dropbox, and are now trying to access a particular labeled file, and we might put a block on that or a quarantine, so they can't do that because they're in a certain scenario. So that's where MCAS kind of works. But going back to that Zscaler model where we can monitor any connection to any service, what happens when they've got a file? Let's take this example here for internal IT. So there's a file that the IT department have classified as highly confidential. They've got it on a network share somewhere, on just a traditional kind of file server, and they're going to then sit there on their PC and they then try and upload that to, let's say, Citrix Sharefile or something like that. Now, we don't manage Citrix Sharefile, so MCAS doesn't know anything about the logons to it. So there's no real way for us to know what they're about to do. They sign into that service and the service lets them in, and then they've then got an ability to do some access out or to egress that data. Now, in our cloud app control policies in Zscaler, we could have put an outright block against Citrix Sharefile, but that might be too much. There may be scenarios where they need to use Citrix Sharefile. We just want to know that in our example here, the IT department's classified information is not going to end up going out to Citrix Sharefile. That's our example. It could be any service. So what we're going to do is, using information protection, we've created our labels. Any of you who had experience of Azure information protection, you're going to see a little bit of that again, because it's a quick way that I can show you the labels. But once you've created your labels here, what we need to do is obtain the underlying identifier for the label. Now we can do that in PowerShell, but it's not great for a presentation like this. So I'll show you where you can do it graphically by going into the Azure portal, searching for information protection. It's largely all read-only now to everybody because it's all managed through the Compliance Center. But what you can still do through the information protection portal is see all the labels that are managed through the Compliance Center. So while that's loading up, what we're going to do here is find that internal IT label. It was a highly confidential one, and we're going to look for the identifier, the label ID. It's always at the bottom of this screen here. We've got the label ID for that classification. Now, by taking that label ID in there through the Zscaler portal, what we can do now is use the DLP service, the DLP engine, because remember, we're watching all the traffic that's going in and out of those devices. And what we're going to do here is we're going to create an entry for a dictionary. Now, you kind of get your naming conventions how you want. I'm going to call it Microsoft Information Protection so I can find it again when we come to look for this. And the label was internal IT, so I'll go with that so that it makes sense. And I'm going to put that identifier in there, look for any of them, and just save that. So now I've got something I can look for whenever anything passes through the Zscaler service. Now I need to give Zscaler I call it an engine, so it's like a kind of collection of things to look for, because then I'm going to apply that through a policy. Now I've got one already created in here for Microsoft Information Protection, but you can have as many of these as you need. And what we're going to do in here is we're going to add another label. So we've got one there already for the technical services. These may be separate engines. It depends on the structure that you're going for. But what I'll find now is that extra dictionary type. I don't want to know if it turns up once. As soon as it turns up, I want to hit it, and I'm going to look for any of these. So any of these labels appearing in any upload or any kind of traffic passing out through the environment I want to know about, I'm going to use that somewhere. And then through a DLP policy in here, what I can do is add a content inspection policy, and in here I'm then going to look for that DLP engine that I created, so the list of kind of regex strings basically that I've compiled. But because I'm doing it through the labeling system, that's a very specific, unique identifier. I'm guaranteed that I will, kind of find that if it's in the header of the file, the message, even if it's stamped inside the file. But what information protection does is stamp it in the header of the file. So as it passes through the Zscaler service, I can look for that and see it, and I'll know, because it's very unique identifier, that I've accurately identified that content. And then what I wanted to do in our example was just to put that against Citrix share file. So one word or two, there we go. So Citrix share file. So now I've got a DLP rule that says whenever I see one of those labels and the user is going for Citrix share file, what do I want to do? So I'm either going to block the activity from happening, typical kind of scenario for DLP, or I might allow that to go through, but I might have a list of auditors that get notified with a template that I've created whenever that happens. May also notify them if it's blocked. But that's the basic structure of setting out DLP, where we've got a really tight integration between creating labels, classifying content within Microsoft's environment. So we're kind of fairly familiar with that process, and it's quite flexible. Using that label identifier because it's absolutely unique, feeding that into the Zscaler DLP dictionaries, and then combining those dictionary search objects together into engines, and then applying those engines through DLP policies, where we can then say, for these people accessing this service, look for these things and take that this action. And then all of that, everything that's going on in Zscaler, all of those activities can then feed back. There's a kind of feedback loop directly into the Cloud App Security Service, where Zscaler will feed all of its log information for any and every event that occurred across the Zscaler platform for all the users back into that central log. And for those of you that are then extending the Cloud App Security and the Microsoft set of tools into a SIEM solution, and that may be Log Analytics and the Sentinel service, you can then feed, or you will have a feed of all of the interactions that the users performed directly into Sentinel, where you can then perform additional analysis over it and maybe fire alerts or trigger something that your security ops team would need to deal with. So I know I've kind of whizzed through a whole load of controls and things there, or possibilities. Really, the point of this tech talk was to give some idea of what's possible, to sort of maybe introduce yourselves to the idea that we're not just a complete Microsoft one, kind of shop. We do interoperate with a number of other technology providers, and to kind of let you guys know that from Zscaler's point of view, we found that to be one of the most comprehensive, tightly integrated platforms that really lends itself to building out that kind of Microsoft portfolio. So what I wanted to make sure you kind of took away from this particular talk was, we use this a lot to build this kind of comprehensive DLP capability when we've got clients who are looking to use and leverage that Microsoft platform of conditional access combined with the labeling services and the information protection system, and getting that data classification together. And when they then, as most do, realize that we need to extend this to not only cover all the things that are connected to our Microsoft world, where MCAS can then interrogate what the users are doing, but we also need to cover all the things that are not connected to our Microsoft world. And rather than then have to reinvent the DLP strategy, we just want to use the classification system that we spent so much time putting together and make decisions about where content can go, even when we don't manage the environments that the users are connecting to. So if it wasn't kind of evident through the glimpse that I gave you there, the Zscaler Internet Access Service is all about kind of extending MCAS and getting visibility and control over all connectivity that your users provide. It has a world of other benefits to it as well, that Patrick alluded to some of them at the beginning. Effectively, Zscaler maintain direct connectivity to all of the data centers that host Office 365. So there are performance benefits and kind of direct interconnectivity capabilities and things in the platform. There's a lot of things you can explore there, but it's about that granular visibility and control over all of the traffic going in and out of your users' client machines. And while we didn't really look at it in detail, I did mention it a bit at the beginning. The private access service, that's all about ensuring that you're only ever allowing the users to connect to the specific server on a specific port, and never having any open inbound connections from the internet to any of your services and systems. So I'll start to kind of wrap up, and we'll do some questions. Patrick did mention it, I think, at the start. We won't have a tech talk in December, December being a kind of fairly busy month, but it doesn't quite fit, unfortunately, for everybody to be able to run that one. So we will be back in January with our next tech talk, and softworks.com/tech talks is where you'll be able to find all of the kind of on-demand ones if you want to go back and have a look through previous talks that we've done. And we'll be communicating out the next dates. It's always the Tuesday of the month. So yeah, keep an eye out for that invite. You should receive it through fairly shortly. So let's have a look and see what we've got kind of questions wise. For those of you that want more information or a specific scenario that you want to go through, contact details are on screen. Please reach out to us, and we'll quite happily set up sessions to go through that with you. One question that I've got here in the chat is, can you segment user and groups so that some users can use? Yes, absolutely. So I can actually show you very, very quickly here how that piece comes together. If you're familiar with provisioning enterprise applications in Azure, when you set up when you set up access or the synchronization of users and their sign-in capability, you'll define a set of groups. Those groups map through to a set of groups in the Zscaler portal. So you might have one for every department, one for certain groups of users. And then once you're looking to build out policies or controls over these particular cloud app services, just pick one on there, doesn't really matter which one, you'll see those groups that came through from Azure AD are available in Zscaler. Okay, I think it kind of looks like only the one question on this session, so hopefully that everything was quite informative. Yeah, as I say, any specific scenarios that you'd like to walk through or understand more about, we provide a free initial consult session. Any member of our team can get you booked up with one of those, and we'll walk through in as much detail as you would like, or in just a kind of presentation style if that's the starting point where you want to see what more of what the capabilities are, and to give you that kind of depth of understanding of how to put these systems together. And this is something that we've been doing now for upwards of 5 years, and we've kind of grown with the platform. So hopefully we can give you that detailed level of advice. With that, I think we'll wrap up. I'm kind of pretty much bang on time for once. You'll see in the Q&A, there's a link there for a very quick survey. It just helps give some feedback for me, as well as for kind of the team, as to what the next topics might be, or what topics you'd like to hear more about. And we've also got an offer at the moment that my marketing team have asked me to make sure that you're aware of, around a free security assessment. So we can include everything, as we always will do with the Microsoft portfolio of services, in that assessment. If you want to extend that to look at what's possible with Zscaler, you just need to ask. We'll always add those on for you. So with that, thank you very much for joining us, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you next time.